Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Today have I got a really cooler to review. This is the CORSAIR Hydro Series H115i Extreme Edition liquid CPU cooling. Yes, they actually call it the Extreme Edition. If you want to play all current games in 2017 at 1080p, ultra max detail, 60 frames per second, no compromise, yeah, you actually need a GTX 1080 now. The 1070 will mostly do it, most of the time, in most of the games. But not all of them, and it will dip below 60 frames per second at times. Hang on, we're going for a ride. This is kind of ridiculous. Wait for it. Ow! Shirt balls, that's going to hurt. Hey, thankfully it's not my armored SUV. Can we go down the whole mountain? Oh, ouch, boom. I'm glad we haven't upgraded this. I hope the guy on top of the truck doesn't mind. And down we go, down the mountain we go, going on a journey to the Shire. No, I shouldn't give up my day job to sing. Oh, another frame dip. That was 30 frames per second. That was like 5 or 10 frames. That was a momentary hitch. But you saw it there as we were loading the lower levels. It hitched again. That is not the graphics card. We have an overclocked 2.1 gigahertz 1080 running at 1080p. It's not the graphics card. It's the CPU. What can I say? Just to be clear, the reason we're starting with the Pentium 4 Emergency Edition, I kid you not, everybody called it the Emergency Edition back then. It was the biggest joke in the industry. Some of you may wonder why we're starting with the 2003 Pentium 4 Extreme Edition. In 2019, $1,000 for an 18-core, 4.8 gigahertz Intel CPU honestly was not that bad. While expensive, had you bought one 4 years ago, you would still have a pretty sweet CPU that has lots of life left in it, except for one tiny problem, and that's instructions per clock cycle. Now, I'll talk about it more in part 2, but the short version is this. The $300 i5-13600K matches the i9-10980XE in multi-threaded performance, and it absolutely demolishes it in single-threaded workloads. How much so? The i5-13600K is up to double the per-core performance for 1/3 the price, half the power consumption, and installs on less expensive motherboards. Now you do lose quad-channel RAM, 44 PCI Express lanes, and AVX512 hardware support, but most people don't need any of that. And if you do, well, so be it, but you won't like part 3 of this video series where I talk about the future because your options suck for something new and they aren't likely to get better anytime soon. Spoiler alert. Power supply. I want your thoughts on this.
Thermaltake Smart Series, 700 watts, SLI Crossfire ready, continuous power.
That dates it right there when it says SLI and Crossfire ready.
ATX 12 volt, EPS 12 volt, Haswell ready, certified active PF.
Don't read all that. This is a 700 watt power supply that was designed when Haswell was originally new. So the FX chips have 8 integer units, and they have 4 full floating point units that can be divided into 8 half floating point units. I'm paraphrasing, it's a little more complicated. So they essentially can do 8 integers and 4 floating points at the same time, and every other integer unit shares certain cache and compute resources. So for certain functions, certain specific functions, it really does have 8 cores and can process 8 integer functions at once. But it can't really prefetch, cache, and do floating point 8 times. So it's like half the chip is 4 cores and half the chip is 8 cores.
Oh.
If software had been if Intel had gone that direction too, instead of hyperthreading, if Windows and all of our games had been written with that CPU design in mind, then it would actually be fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that except for the fact that nothing ever really got written for it. And since games, especially 3D stuff, uses a lot of floating point stuff, it kind of turned into a 4-core chip. Or a really slow
8-core
Eight-core
chip.
chip.
Because if the floating point units have to split their work
Yes.
across 8 threads,
Yes.
then they're basically half performance.
Why did someone think that was a good idea?
That's a great question. The reason is...
Because doesn't hyperthreading work better?
Not really. The Alder Lake upcoming cores,
The
for
Big
example,
Little?
Big Little. It's
I was gonna
the funny thing is the Big Little is almost kind of going back to the idea
Yeah.
of Bulldozer, which is you have a few powerful
Doing
units
this
and a
and some
few
doing
slow
this.
units. And imagine that Intel could also put their new XE graphics on board.
Yeah.
And so they could have big cores, little cores, and GPU cores. When Bulldozer first came out, it was a good idea, but it got absolutely gobsmacked by the i5 2500K. And the reason for that was because at the time, nothing used 8 cores. There was no software for it. There was no optimization for it. It took a long time for anything to happen. And so, frankly, it kind of died on the vine. The market share penetration of those FX chips never went anywhere. So AMD almost went out of business. It was so bad. I mean, it really was bad. 8 years later, a lot of software now uses more threads, now uses, and a lot of development tools have just slowly had some FX development just sort of squeezed in there over time, just due to the fact that they eventually sold enough of them and eventually a few tweaks got put in and things improved.
Right.
Whereas today, a 4-core, 4-thread chip is actually very hard limiting. Go try to play Battlefield 5 multiplayer, Call of Duty Warzone on a 4-core, 4-thread i5 2500K and tell me it's a nice, pleasant, smooth experience. It's horrific. It's useless. You can do it. But anybody who says, yeah, I play it, it's fine, there's no problem whatsoever, simply has never used anything better because they don't, with respect, know what they're talking about. An FX 8300 will average a lower average frame rate than an i5 2500K. But on modern games today,
Yep.
its minimums and its smoothness, its frame pacing will be much better.
Huh.
So if you look at a frame time delivery chart, it'll be a much nicer chart, just a lower chart.
Okay.
Ghost Recon Breakpoint,
Yes.
The Division 2,
Yes.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey
Yes.
actually play fine on an FX 8300.
Okay.
They just don't play very fast. You will struggle, regardless of your GPU choice, to break 60 frames per second on an FX 8300 in those games.
Even if you bring the settings to low?
It's not a graphics setting issue. That's a graphics card. It doesn't matter. It can't generate the world. It can't draw the triangles. It can't build the universe. The games are too advanced. Like,
So there's nothing in the settings you can do?
no.
No.
Your CPU is too slow. But 50 to 60 frames per second with reasonable frame deliveries, not great. I've played Ghost Recon Breakpoint on an FX 8300. I would take, if the only two choices on earth to play Ghost Recon Breakpoint were an FX 8300 or an i5 2500K, I'd take the FX 8300.
Okay.
Because I know what happens when you play Ghost Recon Breakpoint on a 4-core, 4-thread CPU. It's non-functional. I have a video on that.
You do?
I did that on a 4-core, 4-thread Ryzen chip with no hyperthreading. There were sections where the game would just skip and lag. And there was, I showed this in the video, where I was trying to drive in a truck and the game just froze for a second, and then it would go a little longer, and then it would hitch for half a second. The hitches were so bad, it's not playable.
Bad. That doesn't sound fun.
It's not. It's the wrong tool for the job. And to anybody still using a 4-core, 4-thread chip, see, but again, World of Warships, World of Tanks, you'd be like, what's the problem, man? I game all the time. Everything's great. What games? Well, I don't play that Ghost Recon crap. Well, then you're fine.
Exactly.
That's fine. So to answer the question, FX 8350 or 8300 or any of the FX chips, if you have one and it's all you can afford, you'll want to be a little bit choosy in your game choices, but it does work today. Most people online go to Reddit, go to Twitter, go to Discords. They all seem to think, well, do you get a 6-core or do you get an 8-core? Most people agree that 4 cores are now relegated to basic entry-level stuff for older machines. Those certainly are yesterday's news. Here's the funny thing. He's not crazy to ask this question, and I'm sure plenty of people say, what? 9900K? How dare you even think of upgrading it? That is outrageous. An i9 9900, yes, I'll get to the point. An i9 9900K is better than a lot of our viewers have.
It is.
It is a better CPU. There's a ton of people watching who have an FX 8300 or a Ryzen 5 1600 or maybe a Ryzen 7 2700. A 9900K is better than all of those in every respect. Faster per core, more cores, everything, higher clock speed, etc. He has a 3080 and he's running at 1080p.
No,
There-
1440.
I'm sorry, thank you. I was thinking as opposed to 4K, but you're right. He's running at 1440p. There will be situations, not many, but they do exist, where even at 1440p, he will be CPU bottlenecked. But it's rare. I have a 9900K at home, and I am actually looking at replacing that with a Ryzen 9 5950X, 16-core, 32-thread chip. But wait, Tech, I can already hear you going to the comment section. You're a content creator. You make 4K YouTube videos. Well, of course, you want a faster machine. I have a 24-core Threadripper. I've got an 18-core Cascade Lake X. My work machines are high-end desktop professional machines with all very nice stuff in them, 128 gigs of RAM in the works. This is my personal gaming machine at home. I don't make videos on it. I find 8 cores is very much starting to become a limitation. And the game that shows that limitation the most is
Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk.
But you also multitask more than the average person too. So between multitasking and playing a game, it's kind of like...
Cyberpunk runs fine on a 9900K if that's all you're doing. Either a single monitor situation, or if you have 2 monitors, you minimize and close whatever's on the other monitor and you just play your game. And that's fine. And if you do that, I do that, it works pretty well. In older games, I could certainly have my other monitor watching a Twitch stream, watching a YouTube video. I could be occasionally chatting in Discord or chatting on a forum or chatting on Twitter while I'm doing stuff. In Cyberpunk, if I have the web browsers open, if I'm doing something while I'm playing, the difference in frame stutter, the difference in smoothness is absolutely... I don't need benchmarks to tell the difference. It is very clear that the CPU is tasked to capacity. Now, I also have other things running on my machine because I have backups and syncs and I have a lot of files and a lot of storage and whatnot. And it definitely is, shall we say, an above average tasked machine. It is not my work machine. The green protagonist comes in. Thank you very much for the $5. Greatly appreciated, sir. I have an i9 9900K PC with a GTX 1080 Ti. Would it be worth upgrading the GPU or just running that combo into the ground? Yes, it would. Anything up to a 3090 or a 4070 would be fine. A 7900 XT would be fine. Or an XTX if you just want the best. I wouldn't put a 4090 on there. I wouldn't put a 4080 on there. They'd be wasted. But you can absolutely upgrade that graphics card. Now, the 1080 Ti is great. What resolution you're running at, what games are you playing, what refresh rate do you expect? Because if you're playing at 1440p, 60 hertz, high detail, and you're okay with that, a 1080 Ti is honestly enough for a lot of games today, mostly. The 11 gigs of VRAM helps tremendously. But used 3080s can be had for under $400 on eBay right now. For like $370, a 3080 10 gig card will trounce that 1080 Ti by a lot. A 4070 12 gig is a little bit more at about $550, but you get a brand new card that wasn't mined on. You get a brand new card that wasn't mined on, and you get the latest 40 series features. You get DLSS 3, you get all the other stuff that comes with 40 series, better encoders, etc. So if you don't mind, do that. Would I put a 4070 on a 9900K? Yes, if you don't mind the price, or buy a used 3080. A 3090s probably cost too much, although 24 gigs of VRAM is pretty nice. If you are enjoying your system, keep it. The 9900K is great. You don't have a long time with that left, though. It's not the cores, it's the security. If you're still running a Core 2 Duo or Core 2 Quad in 2019, and worse, you have Windows 10 on it, please, it's time to retire that thing. I actually still have Windows 10 on this, but I'm going to wipe it and reinstall Windows XP. This is going to become a long-term legacy Windows XP machine. I'll find something appropriate to put in here in terms of video card. I actually had a couple of video cards sent to me by viewers that I did in unboxings last year in 2018, one of which was, I believe it was an 8800 GTX. Maybe it was a GTS. It's on the shelf downstairs. I keep all that stuff. The stuff that everybody has sent me, I certainly appreciate it. That would actually be a pretty cool graphics card to put in here and make it a legacy computer. Offline, it's not going to access anything. It's not going to be used for anything. But it would provide me with a long-term Windows XP box where everything's supported and everything works properly and you don't have to mess with compatibility. This i7 is going to become my long-term Windows 7 box. Windows 7 runs beautifully on the i7 920. Now, as I mentioned in the home theater PC video, this is no longer secure. It has no Spectre fixes. The Intel management engine is ridiculously out of date. It has not received a BIOS update since 2011. This thing is horribly insecure at this point. And if you have an i7 920 and you access your email and your online banking on it, in my opinion, you're crazy. There's no way to make this computer secure. It is now inherently insecure. If you wanted to live stream this game, if you wanted to live stream all the new games, it would be pretty rough. We're starting back here at the beginning of the benchmark, and I'm going to slow this way down so you can see the numbers without them changing so rapidly. This is running at 5% speed, so you'll still see some motion and stuff going on, but it gives you a chance to look at the numbers change slowly without having to pause and restart the video. Take a look at the i7 920. Please remember, this is a almost 2 gigahertz overclock. 4.5 gigahertz instead of 2.6. That is monstrous. That's when overclocking meant something. Today, you overclock, you get 300 megahertz and you go, woohoo! Come on. This was when overclocking meant something. The graphics card is almost bored. And the only reason it's not 100% bored is we're at 1440p instead of 1080p, and the graphics card is at 64%. The CPU is pegged at 100% and has nowhere else to go. Every core, every thread, every single bit of that CPU is basically going, ouch, please can I go home now, this hurts. On the i7 980X, we're at about 75% usage. So it's using most of the cores and threads, but not all of them. You do, in fact, have a little bit in reserve. Now, granted, we're not exactly the same spot doing exactly the same thing, but it's roughly similar. We're doing the same sort of thing, playing in daylight on the street, in an open environment. So it's similar in that regard. Take a look at the real-time performance number. What performance you get will depend dramatically. Now, I played this for like 20 minutes, and I'm not going to show you all of that, but how much you do throughout the run is obviously going to affect the performance at any given moment. But take a look at the real-time performance right now. 71 to 107. That's fairly large in terms of performance difference. It won't always be that much, and there'll be times when they get closer, especially, I did go indoors later. I probably spent too much time indoors, which kicked both numbers up, which kind of moved the averages around a little bit. That probably helped the 4-core chip more than the 6-core chip did. In the indoor section, the frame rate was closer. So I'm showing this to you again in slow-mo, so you can realize that, yes, if you look at averages, I'll show you the chart in just a minute. You may very well say, what's the big deal? Clearly there's no benefit to 6 cores. Oh man, these old things run the game great. There's no problem. Well, there is and there isn't. From a good enough point of view, is a 4-core, 8-thread i7 920 from 12 years ago, because it launched at the end of 2000, well, it's really 11 years ago. It launched at the end of 2008. At 4.5 gigahertz, which again is a monster overclock, is it good enough to play The Division 2 in 2020? Yes, it is. You don't need a 2080 Ti, of course. If you want to play at 1440p, a RTX 2070 Super or a RX 5700 XT would be absolutely lovely and would probably be right at about 100% usage in this scenario. It might be a little bit lower on the frame rates, but you certainly don't need a 2080 Ti. And of course, if you can afford a 2080 Ti, you shouldn't be using these CPUs anyway. That's kind of beside the point. But the reason I'm running this at 5% is I just want to sort of hammer home the point that these are completely clean test machines. It's a fresh install of Windows. Nothing's running in the task tray. Everything is as pure gets. This copy of Windows has not been updated from 4 different previous versions. It hasn't had 7 versions of the NVIDIA driver on it. I haven't changed video cards from anything else. There's nothing on it. It is as pristine gets. And we are using 100% of that poor i7-920. The i7-980X is also being fully utilized, but this game does not use 12 threads, at least not in this. We could go into the dark zone in PvP and use a bit more. And there's a bit left in reserve on the 980X for stuff running in the background, a web browser running, browsing the web, watching a YouTube video like this one, watching a Twitch stream, various programs syncing and updating, Dropbox and G Drive and OneDrive and whatever else you have running, because none of that stuff's running on this test bench.
Hi, and welcome to Tech Deals. Today, have I got a deal for you? I have got what... When I first started working with Threadripper back in 2017, I purchased an Asus M.2 HyperCard so I could install 4 NVMe SSDs into the third PCI Express X16 slot of my X299 motherboard and create a large, fast scratch drive for video editing. At the time, 2 terabytes was the largest reasonable NVMe drive size offered, and so I put 4 of the Intel 660p drives in, put them into a RAID 0 stripe, and I created a single 8 terabyte scratch drive for video editing. At that time, it was simply not possible to install 4 NVMe drives into consumer systems. Most had either 1 or 2 M.2 slots on the motherboard, with a very, very rare few having 3. But with the primary one being used for boot, you really only had 1 or 2 left over for storage. Fast forward to today, and Z690 boards exist for the i9-13900K that have 5 M.2 slots on boards. Plus, NVMe has grown to offer reasonable 4 terabyte and 8 terabyte drive sizes, thus removing the need for M.2 HyperCards and PCI Express bifurcation on an X16 slot on an HEDT motherboard. Ghost Recon Breakpoint was, shall we say, challenged at launch. It received mixed reviews. It was not considered to be a true Ghost Recon game. It diverged substantially from the previous Ghost Recon games. And lo and behold, they made NFTs for it. Yes, really, seriously, they made NF-frickin-Ts for this. They failed, thank goodness, and they said, okay, we're not doing that anymore. But it kind of killed a lot of interest in the game. Actually, some of the game's design and overall microtransactions probably did that too. Wildlands, which came before, was in many ways a better game, although technically this is superior. The game mechanics of the world are maybe a little more interesting, although it is a massive world with 5,000 million places to go. But it's fun to play, and I've played it a bunch. I've nearly cleared the game. I've almost done a 100% clearing of the map, but not quite. I have way too many hundreds of hours into it, which is one of the reasons why you're watching it today. It's a good excuse to play some Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Now, the i7-4790K here is a 9-year-old CPU from 2014, and we're using almost all of it. I'm actually kind of surprised how well this runs, considering that most games do not use hyperthreading very well. This could be the Vulkan engine, this could just be enough patches and updates, this could be, well, we don't have a choice, I guess we're using hyperthreading, because we're using 80+% of this CPU. Anything over 50% is into hyperthreading, and traditionally games don't do that very well. Hyperthreading is good for multitasking, it's good for frame pacing, it's good for background tasks, it's good for a variety of things, but typically not for gaming. But in this case, it runs pretty well. Our graphics card's actually being pretty heavily utilized here, and most of the games I tested, it was not. At 1440p, the RTX 2080 Ti is typically not the limitation, the i7-4790K is.
but this is Breakpoint. It is Ultra Detail. It is a 2018 game. It came out about the same time as the RTX 2080 Ti, and it is a good example that if you want to play games at Ultra Detail at 1440p, the top-end graphics card is not crazy. I mentioned this in a recent Q&A. In fact, this was Ask Tech number 27, which just published a few days before I actually recorded this voiceover. And the question was, should I buy a RTX 4070 or should I buy an RX 6800 XT? The goal is new AAA games at 1440p Ultra. And I said, well, I'm going to give you two answers. The first answer is not the one you asked, which is the RTX 4090 is your new best friend. If you're in 2023 buying a new video card today that you want to last for 2+ years at 1440p Ultra, well, you just have to buy the best of the best because the mid-level cards are going to age poorly. If you need a good example of that, you're watching it here. If we swapped out the RTX 2080 Ti with an RTX 2070, which is the 4070 equivalent of 2018, how well do you all think it'd be running right here? Well, it certainly wouldn't be doing 80 frames per second, that much is for sure. In fact, it wouldn't even be doing 60. You'd probably be getting between 40 to 50 frames per second. Now, some of you may think that 40 to 50 frames per second is just fine. And I can hear the comments already, but please go to the keyboard and say it because it boosts engagement. Tech. Ultra is for screenshots. High is for gaming. Just lower the detail to high detail and it'll run just fine on an RTX 2070. You are absolutely correct. But that is not what I was asked. I was specifically asked by a viewer, which card would I buy for 1440p Ultra Detail gaming for AAA games? And my answer is, I wouldn't buy the 4070 or the 6800 XT, I'd buy a 4090. As expensive as it is, I know, it's $1,600, it's crazy, it's ridiculous, whatever, but look how well the 2080 Ti hangs on today. Now, the 2070 does okay as well, but the 2080 Ti does better. It has 11 gigs of VRAM versus the 8 on the 2070, and even for the next 2 years, a 2080 Ti is definitely going to be a better choice for 1440p gaming than a 2070 would. Would I use George asked, thank you for the $2, sir. Would I use the 4 terabyte boot drive for games or data? It works at the end of the video. Yes, I'd use it for both. If I would put a 4 terabyte boot drive in and maybe just that drive to start with, depending upon your needs. Some of you want to have 5 games installed at once and you just play a couple of games at a time. Others want to install half your game library and you're going to want 2 or 3 of them. There's nothing wrong with running your games off the C drive. The performance-wise, there's no substantial difference. Windows and modern drives are so fast. Putting both Windows and some of your games on the C drive is not an issue. But having that 4 gigabytes, 4 gigabytes, 4 gigabyte hard drives, I remember those days. Okay, that's been a while, 25 years. But 4 terabyte drives mean that you leave your other M.2 slots free for 4 or 8 or 16 terabyte drives in the future. Don't laugh. If you build a new machine today, before that machine is obsolete, 16 terabyte NVMe drives will probably be reasonable. Just look 5 years ago. 5 years ago, a 250 gig boot drive was reasonable. Today, 2 terabytes. Actually, 2 terabytes today is cheaper than 250 gigs was back then. Storage is a big deal. I mean, shoot. For those of you who have followed my channel for a while, back in 2017, I built, I tend to name all the builds. That particular build was the Cadillac Platinum build, because at the time it was pretty fancy. It had a $2,000 budget, and in $2,000 in 2017, you got was an i7 8700K, 6 cores, 12 threads, on a Z370 motherboard. It had a 250 gig Samsung 960 EVO boot drive and 16 gigs of RAM. That's all that fit in that budget. And a 1080 Ti. Case, power supply, etc. 16 gigs of RAM and a 250 gig boot drive. is all that fit in that budget. I had 5 SSDs in that machine. I had a pair of Crucial MX300s, which were an odd size. They were 750 gig. Yes, they did used to make 750, kind of a weird size. I had 2 of those in there, SATA drives. And I had a 480 gig ADATA something or other. And something else I can't remember at this point. I used to remember. I had 5 SSDs total, and they totaled up to like 2.5 terabytes total. And managing where games were installed, now I also had a hard drive in there as well, but managing where everything was installed sucked. Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Today we're going back to the future. Yes, that's right. This is part 3 of my history of high-end. Now, if you haven't seen the Back to the Future movies, the above sentence will make no sense. So shame on you for not watching one of the best movie trilogies of all time.
Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting rabbits.
We're not talking about a timeline for that now, but I also completely recognize that the changes and just the market dynamics with Threadripper versus Threadripper Pro that have happened over the past year, God, I hate corporate speak, that have happened over the past year, so was the entire market, I kid you not, I actually copy-pasted this from his actual statement, so as the entire market has just been so constrained, we're looking at that, God, I hate corporate speak. Today in 2023, they don't need Threadripper. They are making profits, their stock price is sky high, and investors are way more bullish. Screw it, we'll go all the way back. Part 28, take 2. At the time, to get 128 gigabytes of RAM, which is what's currently installed in here, I needed 8 DIMMs in quad channel. Today, I can get 128 gigabytes of RAM on 4 DIMMs, and with DDR5 6000 performance, the performance